In 1870, a 31-year-old bookkeeper from Cleveland quietly controlled 4% of America's oil refining capacity. 10 years later, that number was 90%. By 1904, he controlled 91% of all U.S. oil refining, 85% of final sales, and had written the instruction manual for every monopoly that came after him. His name was John D. Rockefeller, and what he built was not just an oil company, it was a system, a way of organizing capital, law, politics, and morality that survived long after Standard Oil was killed in 1911. When the Supreme Court shattered his empire into 34 pieces, people thought they had defeated him. They hadn't. His methods didn't die. They mutated, spread, and now live inside almost every corporation that touches your life in 2025. The gas you put in your car, the pills in your bathroom cabinet, the apps on your phone, the food shipped to your door, the bank that holds your savings. Behind all of them, you'll find the same logic. Vertical integration, own every step of the chain. Horizontal consolidation, eliminate anyone who can challenge you. Regulatory capture, write the rules you are regulated by. Tax-exempt foundations, turn power into philanthropy and shape culture and policy from above. Rockefeller didn't just build an oil empire. He built the architecture of modern corporate control. And you don't escape an architecture. You live inside it. Standard Oil was just the prototype. The method was the real invention. For the last 150 years, that method has been refined and optimized by the biggest players on Earth. Amazon uses it. Google uses it. Pfizer uses it. J.P. Morgan Chase uses it. Different products, different centuries, same playbook. Control the supply chain vertically. Crush or absorb competitors horizontally. Capture the referee. Buy moral cover with charity. And if the state ever tears you apart, arrange things so the fragments you still control are worth even more than the original whole. In this story, we're going to walk through how Rockefeller actually built this system, how it made him arguably the richest individual in modern history, why the breakup of Standard Oil made him wealthier, not poorer, and why more than a century later you are still living in the world he designed. Because understanding this isn't an intellectual hobby. It's survival. The system is engineered to siphon wealth upward to a tiny cluster of firms and families, while giving everyone else just enough convenience and efficiency to accept it as normal. And once you learn to see the pattern, you'll start recognizing it in every bill you pay, every app you open, every choice that never really felt like a choice. John Davidson Rockefeller was born on July 8, 1839, in a small town called Richford, New York, not into respectability, but into contradiction. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, was a traveling salesman and a fraudster, peddling fake cancer cures under the name Dr. William Livingston. He embodied pure opportunism. Vanish when debts came due, reinvent yourself in the next town, sell hope in a bottle, and disappear before the truth caught up. His mother, Eliza, was the opposite, a strict, deeply religious Baptist who believed in discipline, thrift, and the idea that God rewarded order and hard work. From his father, John absorbed a cold, calculating ruthlessness. From his mother, he absorbed an iron sense of moral purpose. Put together, they created something uniquely dangerous, a man who could crush competitors without blinking, and genuinely believe that God wanted him to do it, that consolidating power in his own hands was not greed, but a kind of earthly ministry. To Rockefeller, monopoly wasn't sin. Chaos was sin. Waste was sin. Disorder was sin. If thousands of small operators went bankrupt so that one efficient system could prevail, that wasn't cruelty, that was order. In 1859, the event that would define his life took place, and Rockefeller was nowhere near it. In Titusville, Pennsylvania, oil struck the surface. Within months, the quiet hills of western Pennsylvania turned into something like a 19th-century Silicon Valley gold rush. Wooden derricks shot up overnight. Men poured in with shovels, drills, and dreams of instant fortune. The pattern was familiar even then, a spectacular boom as wells came in and money gushed with the crude. Wild speculation, easy loans, and overnight millionaires. Then overproduction, collapsing prices, bankruptcies, and ghost towns. Crude oil prices whiplashed so violently that anyone trying to drill their way to stability was gambling, not investing. At that time, Rockefeller was a 20-year-old bookkeeper in Cleveland, Ohio. He watched the mania from a distance, not as a prospector, but as an accountant. And that difference mattered. Where others saw oil wells, he saw ledgers. He saw volatility, waste, and chaos at the extraction level, and something much more stable further down the chain. The real opportunity, he realized, wasn't in pulling oil out of the ground. It was in refining, turning that unstable, smelly crude into kerosene that could light millions of lamps around the world. Oil drilling was a lottery. Refining could be a system. In 1863, Rockefeller made his move. He invested $4,000, a huge sum for him at the time, into his first refinery in Cleveland. The location was strategic. Cleveland sat near both the Pennsylvania oil fields and key railroad lines. Within 2 years, that refinery had become the largest in the city. But largest in Cleveland didn't mean safe. Cleveland had around 30 refineries jammed together, all chasing the same customers, all at the mercy of the same wild price swings in crude oil. Competition was brutal. Margins were razor thin. Most operators survived on credit and hope. It's here that Rockefeller's true genius appeared. He realized that in a market this unstable, the winner wouldn't be whoever sold the most. The winner would be whoever controlled the entire game. He didn't want to simply compete on price. He wanted to eliminate the need to compete at all. The tool he chose to do that with would become one of the core pillars of modern capitalism: vertical integration. At the time, most refineries did exactly one thing: refine. They bought crude oil from drillers, turned it into kerosene, sold that kerosene to distributors and wholesalers. Every other step, barrels, transportation, storage, distribution, was someone else's business, someone else's profit center. Rockefeller looked at that chain and asked a different question. Why should anyone else be making money off a process I depend on? So he began pulling each of those independent steps inside his own walls. He bought barrel factories so he didn't have to pay barrel makers. He invested in his own tank cars and negotiated secret deals with railroads so his oil moved cheaper and on better terms than anyone else's. He acquired warehouses for storage. He built pathways to sell directly to end buyers, cutting out layers of middlemen. Every link in the chain that used to belong to someone else became Standard Oil. The math was brutal and beautiful. Where a rival refinery might pay 25 cents for a barrel, Rockefeller could produce it internally for 15. Where competitors paid full freight to ship oil by rail, Rockefeller's tank cars and hidden rebates meant railroads effectively subsidized him while charging others more. These weren't just efficiencies. They were weapons. Because once your costs are structurally lower than everyone else's, you gain a terrifying power. You can cut prices to a level your rivals can't survive and still make money. Rockefeller used that power relentlessly. By 1870, he formalized his growing empire into the Standard Oil Company of Ohio. His operations had expanded from a single plant to the largest refining complex on Earth. Yet even then, he only controlled about 4% of U.S. refining capacity. For most businessmen, that would have been a triumph. For Rockefeller, it was an opening move. If vertical integration gave him unmatched efficiency, it was time for the second phase of his strategy, the one that would etch his name into every antitrust textbook on the planet: horizontal integration. If vertical integration meant owning every stage of a process, horizontal integration meant something much simpler and much colder: own or destroy everyone who does what you do. The first real test of this strategy would later be given a name that sounded less like corporate history and more like a crime scene: the Cleveland Massacre. Over the course of just 3 months in 1872, John D. Rockefeller would walk into the offices of nearly every refinery owner in his city with an offer and a threat. Rockefeller's offer was always delivered calmly, politely, almost generously. He would sit across from a refinery owner, open his ledger, and explain the situation with the steady patience of a preacher delivering a sermon. Standard Oil is inevitable. The industry is consolidating. Costs are falling for those who can scale. Railroads prefer to deal with one large customer, not dozens. Margins will tighten until only the most efficient survive. Then he would slide a number across the table. A buyout offer, usually fair, sometimes even generous. If the owner accepted, Rockefeller paid in cash or Standard Oil stock. Many of these former rivals later became managers, partners, even millionaires under Rockefeller's umbrella. The system rewarded loyalty, but if they refused, the tone changed. Refuse. And Rockefeller dropped kerosene prices so low that no independent refinery could match him. Not for a week. Not for a day, not for a single shipment, because Standard Oil could survive selling at a loss. Everyone else would be bankrupted by it. Railroads helped him, quietly. Through rebates and secret rates, they charged Rockefeller's rivals more per barrel, while paying Standard Oil to ship its own product. It was not a fair fight. Within weeks, competitors bled cash. Within months, they came back to Rockefeller, not as independent businessmen, but as exhausted men ready to surrender. By the end of 1872, Rockefeller controlled 25 out of Cleveland's 26 refineries. From 4% national market share, he jumped to 25% in just 3 months. This pattern: offer purchase. If refused, wage economic war. Buy the remains. Became the foundational blueprint for every monopoly that followed. AT&T used it. U.S. Steel used it. Walmart used it. Amazon uses it now with digital speed and algorithmic precision. By eliminating competitors faster than they could arise, Rockefeller transformed a chaotic industry into a single coordinated organism, with himself at the center. But Cleveland was only the beginning. By the late 1870s, Standard Oil was expanding like a continental storm system. Rockefeller moved east: New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Pittsburgh. Everywhere he went, the same pattern repeated. Secret railroad rebates giving him lower costs. Vertical integration squeezing out middlemen. Price wars draining the lifeblood from anyone who stood in his way. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled 90% of American refining capacity. Think about that number. Not 30%, not 50%, 90%. Economists still debate whether America has ever seen such a total market domination since. Google's 92% share of global search is perhaps the closest parallel, and even that has more alternatives than Standard Oil's competitors did in 1879. But while Rockefeller had reached a pinnacle of industrial power, he also faced a new and dangerous threat: public anger. As Standard Oil grew more powerful, the American public grew more suspicious. Coalitions of small business owners, populist politicians, and investigative journalists portrayed Rockefeller as the embodiment of everything dark in the Gilded Age: a robber baron, a tyrant, a man who crushed livelihoods for sport. Caricatures showed him as an octopus, its tentacles wrapped around Congress, railroads, the courts, even the White House. This growing hatred presented two existential problems. Monopolies were becoming illegal. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, the first federal law aimed explicitly at breaking corporate giants like Standard Oil. Monopolies were becoming politically radioactive. Being the most powerful businessman in America was one thing. Being the most hated man in America was another. Rockefeller needed a solution, something radical, something legal, something that turned the rules of the game in his favor. His lawyers delivered a masterpiece. The trust, the birth of modern corporate power. In 1882, Rockefeller's team invented something entirely new: the Standard Oil Trust. The mechanism was elegant, brilliant, and nearly unbreakable. Standard Oil of Ohio couldn't legally own companies in other states. But a trust could own stock anywhere. So Rockefeller created a trust controlled by 41 shareholders, nearly all of them loyal insiders. The trust itself owned the shares of Standard Oil companies across multiple states. Instead of one giant illegal monopoly, Rockefeller created many smaller legal companies, all controlled by the same trust. It was a legal workaround, a political shield, and the first large-scale corporate trust in U.S. history. The Tobacco Trust, Sugar Trust, and Steel Trust all copied the structure. Eventually, this architecture evolved into the modern holding company, the parent subsidiary model behind Alphabet, Meta, Berkshire Hathaway, J.P. Morgan, and almost every Fortune 500 company today. In other words, Rockefeller didn't just build an oil monopoly. He built the modern corporation. By 1904, the Standard Oil Trust controlled 91% of U.S. refining, 85% of final sales pipelines, tankers, depots, rail lines, and global distribution. Rockefeller himself was now the richest man on Earth. His net worth approached an inflation-adjusted $400 billion, more than Bezos, Musk, and Gates combined. But at the same time, the storm clouds were gathering. Investigative journalist Ida Tarbell, whose father had been crushed by Standard Oil, exposed Rockefeller's methods in a 19-part series that electrified the nation. The public outrage was overwhelming. Politicians demanded action. The Supreme Court finally intervened. In 1911, they declared Standard Oil an illegal monopoly and ordered it broken into 34 independent companies. The world cheered. Rockefeller shrugged, because he knew something the public didn't. He owned shares in all 34 companies, and in breaking Standard Oil apart, the Supreme Court had done something extraordinary. They increased the value of his holdings beyond anything he could have done alone. Before the breakup, Standard Oil stock was worth $600 per share. After the breakup, the combined value of the 34 parts exceeded $2,000 per share. Rockefeller's fortune tripled. The defeat everyone celebrated was the victory he had engineered. And in the decades that followed, those 34 companies quietly began merging again. Standard Oil of New Jersey, Exxon Standard Oil of New York, Mobil Standard Oil of California, Chevron Standard Oil of Indiana, Amoco Standard Oil of Ohio, acquired by BP. By the end of the 20th century, the Standard Oil family had essentially reconsolidated into ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP, three pillars of global oil, still shaping energy markets, geopolitics, and carbon policy. The system had broken itself apart to survive. Then it rebuilt itself in a new form, stronger, safer, and more politically acceptable. But amazingly, even this was not Rockefeller's most enduring invention. The system itself, the method, would outlive him far more profoundly than any oil company could. If Standard Oil was the prototype, then the Rockefeller method was the operating system, a set of principles that could be applied to any industry, in any era, under any regulatory regime. Oil was just the first canvas, and in the century that followed, Rockefeller's method spread far beyond kerosene and refineries. It seeped into retail, finance, pharmaceuticals, technology, media, healthcare, agriculture, industries that didn't even exist when Rockefeller was alive, yet run on rules he helped write. To understand how deeply this system infiltrated modern life, we have to break down its components. 1. Vertical integration. Control every step of the chain. 2. Horizontal consolidation. Eliminate or absorb rivals. 3. Regulatory capture. Influence or shape the rules. 4. Trust and holding structures. Control many companies through 5. Philanthropy. convert power into legitimacy and long-term influence. Every major corporation in 2025 uses some combination of these 5 pillars, and the parallels are not subtle. They are nearly one-to-one. Amazon, the 21st century Standard Oil. Amazon began in the 1990s as an online bookstore. Today, it is a vertically integrated empire that controls its own warehouses, its own delivery trucks, its own cargo airplanes, its own payment network, its own advertising platform, and its own cloud computing giant, AWS. When you buy from Amazon, you are not participating in a market. You are entering an ecosystem where Amazon owns the infrastructure, the logistics, the pricing algorithm, and the data. This is Rockefeller's vertical integration, accelerated by data and automation. And when Amazon wants to eliminate a rival, it doesn't send men with ledgers into their offices. It simply copies best-selling products from third-party sellers, creates cheaper Amazon Basics versions, gives its own products, top placement undercuts competitors until they suffocate. This is the digital version of Rockefeller's price war strategy. Even the acquisitions echo Standard Oil's behavior: Whole Foods, Zappos Ring, Twitch, MGM, hundreds more. Amazon absorbs competitors so quickly that by the time regulators react, the market has already restructured around Amazon's dominance. Google. The trust structure. Perfected. When Rockefeller invented the trust, he created a new way to own companies without merging them into a legally vulnerable giant. Google copied this exactly, but under a modern name, Alphabet. Alphabet is a holding company that owns Google, YouTube, DeepMind, Waymo, Verily, and dozens of other subsidiaries. Each is technically independent, but all are controlled by one parent. This structure shields Google from liability, reduces regulatory exposure, optimizes taxes, allows cross-subsidy, and makes a breakup almost impossible. When regulators try to break up Google, they quickly learn, break up. What exactly? The search engine, the data, the ads division, the subsidiaries? Alphabet was engineered to be antitrust-proof, the modern version of Rockefeller's trust strategy. Big Pharma. Regulatory capture as an art form. Rockefeller didn't just use political power. He refined the art of shaping the rules from within. He worked with railroads to set freight standards. He helped design kerosene purity rules that only Standard Oil could meet. He lobbied states to pass safety laws that ruined smaller competitors. This was the blueprint for today's pharmaceutical landscape. Modern drug companies fund the FDA through user fees, lobby Congress for patent extensions, influence medical school curricula, shape reimbursement rules, and fund the studies regulators rely on. This is not conspiracy. This is public record. The industry Rockefeller helped pioneer evolved into an ecosystem where those who are regulated write the regulations. Big banks. The holding company weaponized J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo all operate as massive holding companies. Sprawling structures containing investment banks, retail banks, wealth management firms, credit card divisions, and countless subsidiaries. This model directly descends from the 1882 Standard Oil Trust. After the 2008 financial crisis, regulators tried to impose new rules under Dodd-Frank. But the holding company structure created a maze. Regulate the parent, the bank subsidiary, the broker-dealer, the derivatives arm, the foreign unit. This structural complexity, pioneered by Rockefeller, allows modern banks to be too complicated to regulate, exactly as designed. Philanthropy, the final most powerful innovation. But Rockefeller's most brilliant invention was not the trust, or vertical integration, or price wars. It was philanthropy. When he created the Rockefeller Foundation in 1913, he effectively did 4 things at once: sheltered his wealth from taxes, disguised his power as generosity, shaped public institutions from the top down, influenced scientific and medical paradigms for generations. The foundation funded universities, hospitals, research labs, and public health systems. It helped design the modern medical school model, one that emphasized pharmaceuticals and laboratory science. Many early pharmaceutical giants emerged from chemical divisions once owned or influenced by Standard Oil affiliates. This isn't speculation, it's documented history. Today, every major tech billionaire uses the same playbook. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Bezos Earth Fund, Open Society Foundations, Ford Foundation Bloomberg, philanthropies. These institutions influence global health, shape educational policy, alter international development, and bypass democratic accountability. They are the modern temples built on Rockefeller's blueprint. The invisible trap you live inside. Here's the most important part, the piece people miss. The system Rockefeller built is not meant to be escaped. It is meant to be invisible. You think you're making choices, but in every major domain of life, your options narrow to the same handful of players. Gasoline Exxon, Chevron, BP, all Standard Oil descendants or imitators. Online retail Amazon or retailers forced to imitate Amazon's model. Search Google, 92% global market share, higher than Standard Oil at its peak. Social media Meta owns Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, horizontal consolidation. Healthcare. A medical system shaped by Rockefeller's foundation, serving pharmaceutical giants. Banking. A network of holding companies shaped by the same corporate architecture Rockefeller pioneered. You are not choosing between competitors. You are choosing between branches of the same logic. In fact, the average American unknowingly transfers around 4,000 year on fuel, 3,000 year on Amazon, 5,000 year on healthcare, 4,200 year on tech and internet services. That's over $13,000 per year flowing into corporations built on the Rockefeller method. Over a lifetime? Around $660,000, not to small businesses or innovators, but to consolidated corporate empires designed to extract maximum value, and escape is nearly impossible. Try not using gas, Google, Amazon, banks, pharmaceuticals, internet platforms. It's a theoretical choice, not a practical one. That's the true brilliance of the Rockefeller system. You don't know you're inside it until you try to leave. So what does this system actually do to you? How does it extract wealth? Not in theory, not in metaphor, but in the real mechanical way Rockefeller designed. Let's break it down. The mechanism of extraction. A system built not to serve you, but to contain you. The Rockefeller method works like an industrial pump, steady, quiet, relentless. Every time you interact with a dominant company, in oil, tech, healthcare, finance, or retail, one of 5 extraction mechanisms activates. 1. Limited choice, the illusion of freedom. You believe you're choosing between brands, but the consolidation ensures you're choosing between the same vertical structures. Example, you choose between Exxon, Chevron, BP, Shell, yet these companies either descend directly from Standard Oil or adopted its model. Choice becomes theater. The system remains intact. 2. Forced participation. You have no alternative. You can refuse to buy gasoline, but nearly every job in America requires transportation. You can refuse Google, but what search engine has 92% market share? You can avoid Amazon, but many products are now cheaper on Amazon than at wholesale distributors. The system eliminates escape routes, just like Rockefeller's competitors in the 1870s who realized, we can't beat him. We can only sell to him. 3. Pricing power. Subtle, not brutal. In monopoly textbooks, price gouging is the danger. In Rockefeller's system, it's the illusion of cheapness that traps you. Standard Oil made kerosene 80% cheaper, and people praised it. Amazon makes shipping cheaper. Google is free, but you pay with your data. Facebook is free, but you pay with your attention. Your behavior, your identity. You feel like you're winning. The system is simply extracting from a different angle. 4. Data extraction, the 21st century upgrade. Rockefeller couldn't have imagined the power of digital surveillance, but the logic is the same. Own the infrastructure, own the information, own the market. Google knows everything you search. Meta knows everything you share. Amazon knows everything you buy. Your bank knows everything you earn, spend, save. Data isn't the new oil. Data is the new Standard Oil, refined, monetized, consolidated. 5. Regulatory capture, the ultimate cheat code. Rockefeller learned very early that the easiest way to win a rigged game is to be the one who rigs it. Modern corporations write the legislation draft, the regulations sponsor, the research fund, the watchdogs influence the courts, and finance the campaigns of the politicians who oversee them. Just as Standard Oil wrote freight rules that only Standard Oil could meet, modern pharma, tech, and finance write regulatory frameworks that protect them and suffocate smaller competitors. The system polices itself. A system with two truths. Here's the paradox most people never fully grasp. Rockefeller's system works, and that's precisely why it's so dangerous. Truth number 1, it provides efficiency. Rockefeller made kerosene 86% cheaper, a miracle in his time. Amazon delivers in 48 hours. Google answers in 0.1 seconds. Pharma produces life-saving drugs at global scale. Exxon keeps the world's energy flowing. The system genuinely delivers value. Truth number 2, it concentrates wealth at the top. The efficiencies at the bottom result in unprecedented wealth concentration, the death of small businesses, the erosion of democratic control, a society run by corporate architecture, not public oversight. Both truths coexist. This is not a morality tale of bad corporations. It is a structural reality of the model Rockefeller built, and that model has been perfected, not weakened, over 150 years. So what can you do? Most people fall into one of 3 responses, each with their own consequences. Option 1, accept the system. You embrace convenience. You use Amazon, Google, Meta. You enjoy the benefits and accept wealth concentration as the cost of modern life. This is the path of least resistance, the one most consumers follow. Option 2, resist the system. You buy from small businesses. You vote for antitrust enforcement. You refuse to participate in monopolistic platforms. This is noble, but costly, in time, money, and convenience. Few can maintain this. Option 3, understand and position yourself within the system. This is Rockefeller's own strategy. If the system funnels wealth upward, you invest in the companies at the top. If Amazon, Google, BP, JP Morgan extract from millions, you become an owner, however small. You cannot dismantle the structure, but you can choose which side of the pump you're standing on. This is not investment advice, it is pattern recognition. Rockefeller didn't fight the system. He was the system, and those who aligned with him prospered. The system outlives the man. John D. Rockefeller died in 1937 at age 97, long enough to witness the breakup of Standard Oil and long enough to see its fragments reconsolidate and tighten their grip. Long enough to watch his foundation reshape American medicine, education, and research for generations. Long enough to see his grandchildren dominate banking and global policy. Carnegie built steel mills, Vanderbilt built railroads, Morgan built banking dynasties. But Rockefeller built something far more enduring. A framework, a method, a system. And systems don't die. They evolve, they adapt, they spread. Rockefeller didn't leave behind a company, he left behind an architecture of power. And that architecture has now replicated itself into Amazon, Google, Meta, ExxonMobil, Chevron, JP Morgan, Pfizer, BlackRock, and every industry that has consolidated into a handful of dominant players. The final philosophical reveal. At the end of his life, Rockefeller said something that still echoes across every boardroom in the world. Competition is a sin. People interpret it as arrogance, as greed, as villainy. But to Rockefeller, this was theology, a worldview. Competition wastes resources, competition duplicates effort, competition is chaos, and chaos is sin. Consolidation, in his mind, was not an attack on freedom. It was an act of order. And in 2025, the world finally looks the way he imagined it. 3 companies dominate oil. 3 dominate banking. 1 dominates search. 1 dominates online retail. 1 dominates social media. A handful dominate healthcare. 2 dominate smartphones. 1 dominates operating systems. 1 dominates cloud infrastructure. This isn't a free market. This is Rockefeller's natural end state of capitalism, not thousands of competitors, but a few corporate sovereigns, each ruling its territory. The system is complete, and you live inside it. Whether you know it or not, whether you accept it or resist it, you are inside the world one man built. Welcome to Rockefeller's economy. Allow is the final part of the rewritten documentary script. This section ties the narrative together, deepens the thematic conclusion, and lands the philosophical punch. Tone: cinematic, reflective, slow-burning, Netflix style. The world Rockefeller left behind, and the one you're living in now. Here's the truth that history whispers. Quietly, insistently, when you study the life of John D. Rockefeller. He didn't build a company. He didn't build an industry. He built the blueprint for the 21st century. When you walk through a supermarket aisle, scroll through Amazon, search on Google, swipe through Instagram, buy gasoline at Chevron, or deposit a check at J.P. Morgan, you are interacting with the descendants of Standard Oil, not by lineage, but by philosophy. This is Rockefeller's world, a world of scale, a world of consolidation, a world where the most efficient structure wins, even if it devours everything around it. We like to pretend modern society is more sophisticated than the Gilded Age, more regulated, more democratic, more decentralized. But look closely. The system is the same. Only the technologies have changed. Only the interfaces have become smoother, sleeker, more pleasant to use. Rockefeller's brutal railroad rebates became Amazon's algorithmic price advantages. His trust structure became Alphabet's corporate labyrinth. His philanthropy became global foundations that influence everything from public health to international education. His consolidation became Meta's empire of social connection. His vertical integration became Apple's walled garden ecosystem. His regulatory capture became Big Pharma's control over approval pathways. The logic remains eternal. The price we pay for efficiency. There is something almost poetic and chilling about how the Rockefeller system trades human freedom for corporate efficiency. The system doesn't steal your money all at once. It doesn't demand loyalty. It doesn't impose visible chains. It simply makes every alternative inconvenient. Try avoiding Amazon. Try avoiding Google search. Try avoiding Apple or Android. Try avoiding credit cards. Try avoiding modern healthcare. Try avoiding gasoline. Try avoiding fossil fuels altogether. You quickly discover that opting out is not rebellion. It's self-exile. Rockefeller understood something fundamental about human nature. People don't need to be forced into a system. They just need to be offered the easiest path. And when the system is everywhere, when every route funnels back to the same corporate structure, when every affordable choice strengthens the same monopolies, you don't need force. You only need inevitability. That is the quiet genius behind the Rockefeller method. The spirit of consolidation, still moving in 2025. Today's monopolies aren't oil barons in dusty hats. They are algorithmic entities, invisible, optimized, data-driven. Amazon knows what you will buy before you buy it. Google knows what you want before you think it. Meta knows who you talk to, what you desire, and what keeps you up at night. BlackRock knows how entire nations allocate capital. ExxonMobil and Chevron know where the world's energy must flow. Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson know what diseases shape our future. This is not chaos. This is order, an order that Rockefeller would have admired. The system is no longer one giant corporation. It is a network of dominant nodes, each controlling their domain, each too intertwined to challenge the others. A digital Standard Oil, a financial Standard Oil, a healthcare Standard Oil, a retail Standard Oil, a technological Standard Oil. Different industries, same ideology. Competition is inefficient. Consolidation is destiny. Rockefeller didn't just predict the future, he engineered it. The last question. Where do you stand? You can't take down the system. You can't escape it. You can't outvote it. You can't outspend it. But you can understand it. And understanding changes the way you navigate the world. It helps you see why prices behave the way they do, why small businesses disappear, why new competitors rarely survive, why innovation happens only inside a few giant firms, why politics bends around corporate influence, why free services cost you something more valuable than money, why wealth has been concentrating upward for a century, and why the middle class is shrinking while corporations grow more powerful each year. When you understand the system, the world stops feeling random. It becomes legible, predictable, almost mechanical. Rockefeller built the gears. We live inside the machine. And whether you choose to accept it, resist it, or align yourself with it, the system keeps turning. Because it wasn't built on one man's ambition. It was built on structural logic, a logic that outlasts men, laws, presidents, and even nations. A logic that runs the modern economy. A logic that shapes the 21st century. A logic that determines how power moves through the world. The final line. John D. Rockefeller didn't just create Standard Oil. He created the operating system of modern capitalism. And you are living in it every single day. Welcome to Rockefeller's world, a world you cannot escape, but can finally begin to see.